Hi, Gavin. How are you?
I'm very well, Dean. How about you?
Yeah, I'm good, mate. Top of the world. Sun's still
That's
shining in the UK and everything.
well.
Okay. Yeah, I know it's amazing. The you were over a couple of months ago, and we went to that direct mail printing place,
Yes.
and you did a very good demo for me, which took a couple of hours. But I thought the good people of LinkedIn might uh, benefit from seeing our vertical apps and having a bit of an explanation of what they do, and notably the iQuote product that goes on the front of it. I mean, usually mailing companies, I tend to see they've got their own in-house system that they bought built in Fox Pro with spreadsheets stuck on the back of it, or they're using a commercial print MIS system to try and do mailing. And this product was really interesting to those guys. And can you just take us through some of the features of it in 20 minutes, 25 minutes, so we can get a taster?
Yeah, I'd love to. We've been hard at work here. We understand that mailing's becoming a much more important part of the diversification of a lot of our printing customers.
Mhm.
So, great opportunity to share with you a little bit about iQuote today. What you'll see on my screen here, of course, is iQuote. And what I thought I might do is just sort of take you through a day in the life of somebody using iQuote. In this particular case, I'm going to dive in and create a new estimate for a mailing project. But please remember, iQuote is more than just about mailing. It is any kind of print. So it excels at web, sheet fed, inkjet, wide format, label, folding
Okay,
carton production. It's very diverse.
that's good to know.
S- So, one of the things I will point out as I'm working through these screens is sort of think a little bit who it could be that's using these screens. It may not just be an estimator. This could be a salesperson out on the road on their iPad or their tablet, actually entering the specs and then shooting those to the estimating department. This could also be a customer service person that is literally entering a job. So remember that iQuote, beyond what the name suggests, is not really just estimating, but it's also an order entry and a job management system. But
Okay.
like I said, a day in the life, if I was quickly looking up a customer here, we need to do a little estimate for that customer. This carousel or these spinning icons, of course, are all user defined, but they represent the different products that a company might produce. And so when someone goes to enter the specifications for this product, it's sort of fine tuned to the kind of product. And we're going to pick a sort of a mailing kind of project today. So we just put in a working title here for this particular project. I can quote as many quantities as I want here. So I'm going to put in a quantity of 10,000, maybe 100,000. Once again, you can key as many quantities as you need. But what you'll notice is the screens are very graphical. And so over towards the left-hand side of the screen, you'll see a sort of a visual representation of this product that I picked from the carousel, which is a mailing, and it suggests that there's probably going to be some kind of outer envelope that is needed in this product. Maybe I want to drop down the various sizes that I have available and tell me a little bit about what this thing looks like. Is it that shaped envelope, or does it look more like that, or do you want to actually drill in and actually change the size of the flaps on the envelope for some reason? Basically the ability for someone to be very visual when they're working through that process. In this case, I'm going to pick a C4 envelope and I'm going to say it's sort of that booklet style. We'll obviously do an important thing like picking the kind of paper stock that I want on this envelope, the basis weight, the grammage, etc., maybe the ink colors. Now you'll also notice that it's likely that I've got a letter of some sort in this mailing. So once again, all I need to do is enter the specs of the product. Maybe once again, picking the paper stock that I want to use. Let's go with a 115 GSM for this one. You'll notice that I'm entering the ink colors, but I can also talk a little bit about the variable data that might be on that piece. So now iQuote's starting to understand that I've got this letter with four color static image, but black and white variable data. Maybe I don't have a supplied component, so I can just get rid of that component. And then it's asking me a few questions about maybe the letter setup, what kind of difficulty factor for that component, and any other standard functions that I might need for that project. So once again, as you can see, I've really just been entering the specifications in the screen. Now, if I was a salesperson and I was out on the road, what I might do next is change the status of this estimate to get somebody else now to start working on that. And these statuses are all actually user defined. So I'm going to submit this request for quote and ask them, please quote that. I need a price as soon as possible. That message is now going into an inbox in somebody else's department. And an example of that might be, here's another screen. This might be another user that has logged into iQuote, and they're starting to see things drop into their queue. Oh, look, we've got an RFQ that's come in. So what they would do, of course, is open up that RFQ or request for quote, and they can pretty much see that everything's filled in. So what they're going to do once again is just change the status and say, I'm going to start working on this estimate, so everybody knows when that's happening. And here's the magic of iQuote. As an estimator, I can certainly see the specs, but what I'm actually going to do is just press the calculate button. And what iQuote is literally doing right now is rip through all of the equipment that I have in my plant and has actually found the price and the best way of engineering each of these different quantities. It's showing me unit price, price per thousand, total price, margin, value added, gross profit, all of that good stuff. But more importantly, it has also actually
Nice.
shown me how it's going to figure that out. Sort of cool, isn't it, Dean?
Yeah, very good.
So, one of the things you will notice, of course, on this small run quantity, it's figured out how to produce the envelope. It's going to run this letter digitally. If I went to, for instance, my larger quantity, as I zoom in, you will see in this particular case, it's found maybe an inkjet web or a roll-fed piece of equipment, finding the correct roll size. But if for some reason I want to change my mind and do that another way, I can literally go in and you will see behind the scenes every possible thing that iQuote evaluated to produce this project. There's a lot of choices there. And if I decide I want to do it this different way, you will notice iQuote is immediately telling me that cost difference. Very interesting concept. If
Yeah.
maybe I had won that job and now that machine is not available, I get some insight into the cost that might incur. And then typically, now that I've done the estimate, a couple of things could take place. One is I might go ahead and literally generate that quote letter, or as an estimator, I might want to dive into a little bit more detail and look behind the scenes at how much paper I need to buy. Maybe I call the vendor now and see if I can get a better price on that paper. And you'll notice I'm actually able to make these changes directly inside this report itself. I don't have to bounce to another screen.
Yeah.
And then, of course, as you would imagine, the next step of the process would typically to be generating a quote letter of some sort. And I'll just grab my favorite quote letter here. You can set up as many different formats as you like. But in this case, we're just going to go ahead and preview that and take a look at the quote letter. I, of course, email this directly from my screen to the customer.
So you could have a broken down one or something like that if you needed to, and all that sort of stuff in there.
That's a great point. You will notice that as I drop this list down, I can also pick maybe this format, and it's quite common on mailings, as you said, Dean, that people want pricing broken out in a little bit more detail. And you will see on this particular format, as I zoom in, I'm starting to see, the price of the outer envelope versus the letter versus the data processing. So very, very common
Cool.
and sort of flexible. So I thought we might just take a quick look at one other thing. And, I sort of walked you through the idea of iQuote being used by many people in the organization. But in this example, I spoke about maybe a salesperson using iQuote to enter the specs. They, of course, then handed that off to the estimating team, who got a little reminder in their inbox that there's something that they need to work on. They literally clicked on that to open the estimate. All of the information was already filled in for them. They literally just pressed the calculate button.
Yeah.
And the fascinating thing about that is if you think about an estimator's job today and you think about what goes through their mind, I think when I see a project, I'm instinctive about the way I should do it.
Yeah.
Sometimes we have found, because iQuote is literally doing, my goodness, sometimes 1,000, 10,000, 20,000 estimates in the space of about 30 seconds. It's literally grinding through all of your equipment trying to find the best way. And it does come up with some interesting concepts. I think the other interesting aspect of this is many of our customers are growing both organically and through acquisition. And
Hmm.
as they are buying new companies or new locations with different equipment, sometimes it's hard for everyone to know about this new equipment that's appearing in the different plants. iQuote, of course, is always aware of that and can sometimes say, hey, you know what? It might make sense for me to do that job on that new equipment. And I can even calculate the transport cost between those facilities, and it still might be the best way of producing that,
I see.
seizing, advantage of new technology. The other thing that, of course, is happening behind the scenes is it's not just calculating the machines, but as I drill down and see even more detail on this estimate, you can actually see all of the materials that are required for this job, potentially even looking for dies that might be available for envelope production, etc., and is actually calculating the waste and the setup at every single step of the process. So we're working our way sort of all the way through that process. So I thought I might touch on just a couple of other possibilities. And as we know, mailings sort of start out as best somebody can describe them, but that they tend to change a lot. The
Yeah.
customer comes back and says, "You know what? I've decided to do it a different way. Let's put a window in that envelope and let's run a couple of different versions of the letter." So what I thought I might do is just take a little time here today to show how quickly those changes can be made for re-estimating. So we're going to dive into the envelope here, and let's say we do want to put a window on this envelope. Well, you'll notice I don't really have anything on my screen that asks me about windows. And we do that for a reason, and the idea is to try and keep the user interface in the screens very simple and easy to use. And when you need something that is not shown on the screen, all I need to do is click on that little plus sign out on the left side. And what happens is a window pops open, and all of the language on this window is actually user defined. You can drive all of the language in iQuote with whatever words that you want to use. And of course, what this starts to do is reveal some of those hidden features that you might need from time to time. Inkjet addressing, here's an example of a window patch. And in this case, there is just one window. I'm going to make this a rectangular shaped window on the front of the envelope. Maybe this is 105 by 40 millimeters. It's asking me what kind of material that I want to use for the window. And then, of course, as I click on the confirm button, you'll now see that information. Now, an important point here, if 80, 90% of the time, most of your envelopes have windows, you could have this characteristic automatically defaulted on the screen. And if someone didn't want, they could just deselect.
I
Let's
see.
now imagine that the customer said, the other thing is I want a couple of versions of that letter. So let's go ahead and do that now and introduce what we call product versioning. And in this particular case, I'm going to go ahead and create a couple of versions. Maybe there's some plate changes or some copy change. And once again, as I confirm, I could actually put in different plate changes. What is changing? All of the ink colors or just the black plate change? So a lot of visual clues there. I could even override the quantities. But now, of course, that I've made that change, I'm simply going to click on the Save button and, of course, do what I would typically do and once again recalculate that estimate. And now iQuote is looking at the possibility to sort of think about the best way of now producing that particular mailing now that there's versions involved with it.
And managing that typically is really difficult at the moment for printing or for mailing companies, all these sorts of things. I see.
I I think it is, Dean, and I think that's why we've seen this sort of incidence of a lot of offline systems, spreadsheets and
Yeah.
FileMaker Pro applications and all of that good stuff. But once again, as we sort of drill into the screen here, we're always getting this really, really nice visual representation of the project. And I'm sort of a big fan of, there's that saying, a picture saves 1,000 words.
Yeah.
But if I look at that diagram, I just get such a strong sense of what's going on. If I tried to interpret this diagram with text, I'd probably have to sit reading in the screen for a minute or two, all of the different fields.
It's an easy way to explain it to the production people what we've got to achieve on this production as well.
It's another great point. Yeah. And speaking of production, one of the things that to think about with iQuote is it's not just an estimating tool, it's also a job creation or an order entry tool. The other thing that I will mention is that sometimes we have customers that are bidding on large mailing opportunities and they get these massive RFPs or request for quote, which
Hmm.
says, I need, if you want to start doing work for me, what I'd like you to do is fill in this big grid of pricing. I need a price for a DL envelope, a C4 envelope, a reply envelope. I need a regular size letter, an oversized letter. The next thing you know, the estimating department's cranking out 40, 50, 60 different grid pricing spread
Hmm.
across maybe 30 quantities. Interestingly enough, there is even capability in iQuote to import product specifications directly from a customer's, maybe even a customer supplied spreadsheet.
Okay.
And when the estimate's finished calculating, sometimes we can actually take the price and re-export it back into the spreadsheet to hand right off to the customer. Another
Nice.
interesting aspect, yeah, another interesting aspect is iQuote is even able to work in what you might call a headless environment because this is all happening behind the scenes in iQuote's very powerful calculation engine. There is even the ability to submit an estimate to iQuote through a web service using an XML file. So if you wanted to put up a really, really cool facing customer portal where
Yeah.
they maybe enter their specs, you could have automated estimating. I know that sounds crazy, but it's an opportunity.
But for mailing projects, that would be really valuable, wouldn't it? You could, and I assume some people get supplied orders that come in every day, those sorts of things that I've got, I don't know, 5,000 mailing every day, or roughly 5,000, and it's this sort of product.
Yep.
You could drive it through there as well.
You can. And so here's another interesting thing because iQuote is not only an estimating tool, but it's also an order processing tool. We have customers that might be doing transactional mailings,
Mhm.
utility bills, power bills, financial statements, and getting files from customers literally every day, some of them every hour.
Yeah,
And iQuote also has the ability to create jobs. So imagine this totally automated workflow environment where some of the work could be created without any human intervention. Great, great advantage, great possibilities.
because when you showed it to that customer, the job screen almost looks like the estimating screen. So that I guess anybody that works in the commercial departments would be familiar with all parts of the product, and they don't really need to know too much about how to manufacture because that's all built into the background.
It's another great point, Dean. And with iQuote, because we're allowing you to take the knowledge of some of your most skilled people, which a lot of our customers are concerned about today. We've got some very skilled people in the workforce. Many of those are close to retirement age, and trying
Hmm.
to find somebody new in the workforce with knowledge of the print and the mail industry is a real challenge. And we've spoken to customers where onboarding time can be anywhere from 12 months to sometimes 2 years,
Yeah,
trying to prevent someone new making a mistake. If we were to turn this estimate into a job now, it's literally a matter of me just changing the status of this, typing in the customer's maybe their purchase order number, selecting which quantity I might want to go ahead with on this job, determining what the mail date is for the project, And at that particular point, what I'm literally doing is now turning this estimate into a job. And as I open this job in a different screen, what we call the planning screen, using features of iQuote that sometimes people refer to iQuote not only as iQuote but iPlan. It's the same
Mhm.
product, but it can do planning as well as quoting. So if I, for instance, switch now to my planning tab and open the list of jobs, there's that job that we just created ready to go in the system. And interestingly enough, when I open that job, a lot of the screens looked exactly the same as what the estimator was using. And we saw that an estimator doesn't necessarily have to have deep skills, but they allow iQuote to show them all of the different ways that something could be produced, and they can always influence that decision, of course. But here's this wonderful opportunity for what you might call cross roles or cross training. If I've got maybe a customer service or an account manager that looks after a customer that is essentially using the same tool as an estimator, there's even a possibility that if a giant RFQ comes in, that a customer service person could maybe assist with some of the more simple estimates.
Yeah.
It's also an opportunity that if the customer service team is now hammered by work at the beginning of the month, that even an estimator could stand in and lend a little bit of help. And of course, once again, everything that we saw in estimating, you know, maybe the production manager tells me we now have to replan this job. Would you please change that to another piece of equipment? Once again, I can do all of that directly in my screen without maybe having to send it back to the estimating department. Now, as you think about a job being entered, there's quite often a lot of information that we didn't really know at estimating stage, but now we know at order entry stage, and I need a place to put that. And of course, most systems have always supported the idea of free-form notes fields where I can type whatever I want. The challenge our customers have been telling us, though, is that if someone just starts typing stuff into a big old text field, it's very hard to determine whether they're making mistakes, whether they're missing information. You can imagine because people's writing style is different from
Yeah.
one person to another. Can you imagine those work tickets
Drives
going
production mad because, yeah, two different jobs for the same product are described in completely two different separate ways because client
exactly?
services are human beings.
So, to try and help with that, we've invented this very cool thing called Smart Notes. And what Smart Notes are is it's almost like an interview process. And what iQuote is actually doing is looking at the specifications of this job and suggesting questions that you need to answer to get this through production. And you'll see little traffic lights on the left. Green is good. I've answered those questions already for you by pulling information from the customer's profile. Yellow is partially entered information, and I'm highlighting in red those very important questions that you probably need to give me. By the way, have you received any files from the customer yet? Have you got the content files? You know, I'm starting to attach files to the job here. And you said that you need to do some postal work on this. Once again, for demonstration purposes, I've just made up some sample questions here. But essentially what I'm doing is the system is leading me through, asking me to answer those very specific instructions that I might need for this job. And I'm doing it in a very standard way, if you will. Maybe there are certain instructions that might not be needed, and of course, I can just throw those in the trash can and just answer those questions that I think are important.
So if
And
you
of
get
course,
everything's a green, you're in business basically.
everything is green. I'm good in business. At this particular point, I'm going to click on save and we're going to think about now releasing this into production. So once again, this is just this classic example. I'm finished what I need to do right now. It's time for somebody else to start working on this job. So I'm going to release this out to manufacturing and I just put in a little, you know,
There you
instructions
go.
for the
That's
next
better.
department. And of course, what happens behind the scenes? Two departments away, somebody else is logging in, and oh, we've got to start ordering paper for this job. And hey, could you please look at the notes on this job? We need to get a postage advance from the customer for the postage on that job. So I'm starting to see a lot of stuff like that. Now, at this point, one of the things that I might choose to do is now go in and start printing out my work tickets, previewing those on screen. And of course, the work tickets in iQuote are completely user defined. So everyone seems to have their own favorite personal style for that information. So, go for it. We actually use Microsoft SQL reporting services to do all of the reporting. But as we wrap up here, I thought I'd just touch on one more brief feature in iQuote that I think is very helpful. And that is what we sometimes refer to as event management. And once again, iQuote has been very proactive here, and it's thinking that customer service person, there's probably a lot of things they want to keep track on that job with many, many projects happening at any time. Well, what iQuote basically did is looked at this job and suggest these are the things. Did we get the job accepted? When are we get dating? When are we going to get data? When would you like to send proofs to the customer? When are those expected back? What's the mail date? What it does is give me the ability now of plugging in some of those dates. Looks like we're going to get data on this on next on the 1st. We really need proof sent to the customer by the 5th. The mail date for this particular project, the customer needs that mailed on that particular date, and their in-home date is going to be shortly maybe the week after that. What you will notice is iQuote has actually figured out there's relationships between all of those events. So
Ah,
24 hours after this is done, you should be starting to work on that. And of course, this now gives a complete sort of task list, not just for this job, but this customer service person can set up their own favorite views and literally design their own screens. And now I'm looking, oh my goodness, I've got proofs running late. I'm now sweeping across all of my jobs with
we're having a
a
disaster.
tool. You got it.
So,
So
so go on.
no, please, Dean. I've been
Uh,
doing too much talking.
yeah, you're right. Yeah, cool. I like it when you talk. I could just listen. Then it makes a lot of sense. Um, so as part of the vertical apps, this all links to our production systems and stuff like that.
It does. So this is totally integrated with our award-winning scheduling solution, Printflow Scheduling, and our shop floor system, AutoCount, and many of our other back-end systems. So this is
Cool.
just one of the many pieces in the puzzle that we think is very helpful for our customers.
And then a lot of people are using an ERP system or something like that to control the standard functions like stock, inventory control, that sort of thing. Or I think in the US, you can take one of our products to do it at the moment, and that'll do
Yeah,
it.
whatever best suits your technology needs.
Okay, cool. Thank you very much.
So I've got a couple of slides that I thought you might
Yeah.
want to talk to everyone
Hmm.
about, Dean. I'll let you have the
Yeah,
floor.
cool. Right, so at the moment, we're doing free discovery sessions for people if they're interested in this for the mailing part of it or general commercial print for large organizations. I know that some of you guys will have print as part of your manufacturing processes, so you might have your own ERP system at the moment. So we can come and see you to talk about doing stuff like that and explain to you how the product works and would work for your customer. You just skip to the next one for me, please, Kevin. We'll put the contact details in the meeting notes. If you've got contact, or just reach out through LinkedIn or send us an email and go from there. And then the next one, I'm going to be unfortunately back with David Lowe for machine data collection in the smart factory, which will show some of the stuff that links to iQuote and the print flow stuff as well. Anyway, I hope you found it interesting. Again, thanks very much, Gavin, and we'll call it a day there. Cheers.
Thanks,
See you,
Dean.
mate.
Have a great day.
And you, mate. Bye.
Bye.